Now, as mentioned earlier, Israel is preparing to renew its vaccine diplomacy program after it was originally shot down by the Attorney General. And joining me to discuss its return, we have former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Danny Ayalon, and Professor Avi Bell from the Faculty of Law at Bar-Ilan University. Thank you both so much for being with us. Now, Ambassador Ayalon, I'm going to start with you. We had you on a couple weeks ago, actually, to discuss this plan when it was first announced, before it was shot down. Did you expect the Attorney General Mandelblit to kill it and to send it back to the drawing board?
No, not really, because basically I think this is a legitimate political decision by the executive branch, and it goes right down to the core of Israel's interests, and it is the choosing of the leaders, certainly of the foreign affairs, to decide which country can get what, including vaccines. By the way, this is not only for Israel to do. We see it by other countries doing the same, and it's not just is exclusive to vaccines. It goes all the way from petroleum to all kinds of other technologies. So I think this is quite legitimate to do it according to one country's interests.
Professor Bell, what was originally wrong with this plan, legally speaking, and what changed since then?
Frankly, I don't think that anything was wrong with the program. The dispute is about a technical matter, which is whether there's a law that specifically authorizes certain actions. And the only thing that's clear in the law is that the Attorney General has no authority to veto this program. He has no authority to dictate the procedures by which it will take place. There are a number of different provisions by which it's fairly clear that senior ministers, including the Ministry of Treasury, the Finance Minister, that is, and in the Ministry of Health, and probably the Prime Minister as well, have the authority to do this sort of thing. And it's pretty much the same authority that the Prime Minister used to acquire the vaccines in the first place. There's a law that's called the Government Assets Law, and it basically permits creating international agreements to acquire and to dispose of government assets for these kinds of purposes. So I think there's nothing legally wrong with it. I think that the Attorney General's overstepped here.
Interesting. So, Ambassador Ayalon, do you agree? Did Attorney General Mandelblit overstep or exceed the purview of his power, of his role?
Well, possibly. I'm not really in a position to go down into the finessing the laws as Professor Avi Bell does, but I can tell you that in principle there is an ongoing debate here, really dividing the country and most of the parties on the role or lack of the executive branch vis-a-vis the legislative, especially the Supreme Court. There is really I would say, a lax, for a long time, attitude by the executive, where they do shy from taking bold, controversial decisions and prefer to just, kicking it up to the court, so they do not take any political flack. So I don't think it's solely let's say the blame is there's a lot of blame to share between all parties, and I do think that we will need, I don't see it coming in the next government elected, because we have such slim margins here and we have other issues, but I think it is high time for Israel to re-regulate the relationship between the executive and legislative branches.
Interesting. All right, now, Professor Bell, I want to come back to you for a second, because aside from Attorney General Mandelblit and his objections, Israel's vaccine diplomacy has been criticized for allegedly holding the health of our allies and our neighbors hostage, as well as for ignoring the plight, allegedly, of the Palestinian Authority. How do you respond? Do you agree that this is somehow a bribe or an extortion of some sort?
I think it's quite the opposite. I think that what happened here is that Israel's had the good fortune to find itself where it took steps to acquire vaccines very early and put itself at the head of the line with a number of companies. And the vaccination program has been extremely successful. And thus we find ourselves towards the end of the vaccination program with apparently a surplus. And at this point, the only responsible thing to do, I think, is what the government is going to do, which is to give it out to other citizens of the world to protect their own health. And I think that it's not only legitimate, it's required that Israel do so as part of its international relations with other countries, that it do so in cooperation with its friends and allies, and it do so in order to help those who need the help and who have ongoing relations with us.
All right, well, you've certainly left us a lot to think about. Professor Avi Bell, Ambassador Dani Ayalon, thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you.